Good morning, everyone. Welcome to week 2 of our course on the different types of training. Today, we're really going to take a look at the question, what considerations should be made when choosing a training type? Let's start with who is the training for? Knowing who that training is for is going to give you an idea of what type of training to create, what needs that we're going to have to cater towards. Right, so we're going to want to answer things like, do we have new employees or veterans in our training? Right? This is the difference between an onboarding or orientation style training or a simple retraining, possibly if someone is already familiar with that content. We should know if this training is for a specific occupation or role. Right? That changes the initial knowledge level and needs of that group. Okay, so knowing, are we training teachers specifically? Are we training firemen? Are we training police officers? Or is this just general training for anyone in a field? Right? Knowing that idea will help you kind of figure out what needs those learners have and what initial knowledge level they have coming in. Okay, group size is a big one. Are we doing one-on-one trainings? Are we doing small group trainings or large group trainings? Okay, that's going to change the technology that you want to use. That's going to change your instruction method options. Okay, so knowing that group size is going to help dictate the type of training that we're going to create. Okay, so very important there. And finally, are we going to have a fixed learner pool or a dynamic learner pool? Right, these learner needs may change year to year if our learner group is also changing year to year. Where if we have a fixed group, okay, we might cater specifically to that group, or if it's dynamic and it's changing, we might have to build in some ways to adapt to the changing needs of our students every year. Okay, so those are some things to consider when you're thinking about who that training is for. Now, when we're talking about the different types of training that exist, there's a lot of different ways we can classify them. And for the sake of simplicity, the ones I want to talk about today are the 5 W's. Okay, so we're going to look at some different questions. We want to know, who is the training for? What are they being trained to do? When will that training take place? Where will the training take place? And finally, why is that training necessary? Okay, to me, these 5 questions really help you get an idea of the training type you need and the different kind of categories that will fit in. And we're going to take a look at each one of these individually. Let's start with who is the training for. Okay, knowing who that training is for is going to give you an idea of what type of training to create, what needs that we're going to have to cater towards. Right, so we're going to want to answer things like, do we have new employees or veterans in our training? Right? This is the difference between an onboarding or orientation style training or a simple retraining, possibly if someone is already familiar with that content. We should know if this training is for a specific occupation or role. Right, that changes the initial knowledge level and needs of that group. Okay, so knowing, are we training teachers specifically? Are we training firemen? Are we training police officers? Or is this just general training for anyone in a field? Right, knowing that idea will help you kind of figure out what needs those learners have and what initial knowledge level they have coming in. Okay, group size is a big one. Are we doing one-on-one trainings? Are we doing small group trainings or large group trainings? Okay, that's going to change the technology that you want to use. That's going to change your instruction method options. Okay, so knowing that group size is going to help dictate the type of training that we're going to create. Okay, so very important there. And finally, are we going to have a fixed learner pool or a dynamic learner pool? Right, these learner needs may change year to year if our learner group is also changing year to year. Where if we have a fixed group, okay, we might cater specifically to that group, or if it's dynamic and it's changing, we might have to build in some ways to adapt to the changing needs of our students every year. Okay, so those are some things to consider when you're thinking about who that training is for. Next, we want to consider what are they being trained to do. Okay, if the last slide was our learner needs, this slide is our content needs, right? Our content analysis. What are we trying to train someone to do? Is it a specific skill? Okay, is this a skill-based training? Well, in that case, we need to know our learners' prerequisite knowledge so that we can decide how to get them caught up to what they need to know, right? We call that the performance gap. And knowing that performance gap is going to help us figure out our training a lot in the case of skill-based trainings. Okay, are we being trained to get a certification or to pass an assessment? In that case, we really need to know our industry standards and expectations so that we can train our learners to meet those standards and expectations. Perhaps we don't know what we need to train someone to do. Maybe there's a consulting gig and they don't know yet what they're bad at. So they're asking you to come in as a training expert and kind of figure out where to help them, right? This happens a lot in consulting, where the skill that we need to train them up on is unknown. We have to figure it out. In that case, it's a good idea to come up with some look-fors, right? These are things that you look for in the field to know if something's being done correctly or not correctly, right? And we want to diagnose problems in this case. We're looking for areas that we can improve, areas of improvement, possible problems that need to be solved, right? That sort of thing. So sometimes we don't know the skill that we need to train for. We have to go find what needs training, right? And that's kind of the consulting or coaching side of the training world. And finally, there's professional development. In this case, a lot of times we're looking at continuous learning. Okay, professional development could mean skill-based training every year. It could mean technical skill training. It might mean soft skills, just like communication. Okay, but the real theme with professional development is we have this continuous learning. So we're often introducing new topics and building off our learners' knowledge base in different ways. Okay, so knowing these ideas or considering these ideas when setting up your training, I think will really help you kind of figure out what does our content need, right? What skills are we after? What certifications do we need to meet? That sort of thing will really help guide us when we're considering how to build our content in our training. Next, we might consider when will the training take place. This is becoming more and more important in our tech-heavy world. We don't always have to be working on things at the same time anymore. Okay, so we have this new option of synchronicity with our courses. Okay, you guys have probably heard of this in one way or another. We do a lot of online classes here at UNR, and usually those classes are asynchronous, synchronous, or mixed. Right? Asynchronous means we are not meeting at the same time. Okay, students are working on the content at their own pace, at their own time that's convenient for them. Synchronous is when we would meet at the same time, maybe for a Zoom meeting to go over the content. And mixed is kind of in between, right? You might have a synchronous lesson, but an asynchronous discussion. Okay, so consider that when we're talking about training. How much of it is happening at the same time versus different times? Okay, other things to consider. The meeting length is going to play a role. Okay, are we not meeting at all? Maybe your training is going to be done through email announcements or through online videos. Maybe there's a 5-minute meeting, a 30-minute meeting, a 2-hour meeting, right? But knowing how long you're going to be meeting for is going to determine what options you have available, what technology you're going to have to use to make your training adapt to that meeting length window. Also important, meeting frequency. Okay, are you meeting daily, weekly, monthly, annually? Are you just going to meet one time for this training? Right? All of that's important when considering how to build your training. Also, the number of meetings. Okay, we mentioned before there might be a single meeting. There might be a fixed number. We're going to do 5 training sessions and move on. Or sometimes it's a reoccurring training. Maybe you have to meet once a month or once a year to re-up on this training to confirm that you know this content, right? All of this information is important when you're figuring out how best to design your training, right? And the needs of that training. Next up, you might consider, where will the training take place? Okay, we don't all have to be in the same place anymore to learn with one another, right? Once again, this tech revolution, it's amazing. So now we have options. We can have an in-person location for our training. Places like classrooms, computer labs, job sites are going to be where a lot of trainings take place, right? Hands-on training, maybe at their workstations or at the site itself. There also might be distance learning that occurs, right? Maybe through an LMS or a digital meeting like Zoom. An online video. Okay, if you post a training video onto YouTube and send it out, right? That is distance learning. That is a way to do training now. Even email trainings are a possibility where you're just sending out information via email. And finally, we have blended learning, which is a mix of the two. Okay, we might have in-person instruction with distance classwork, or maybe we flip that around and the instruction is online and the classwork takes place in person. Okay, the flipped classroom approach. But there's lots of ideas here, lots of options on, are we training in person? Are we training in distance? And then what tools do we need at each site to accommodate that learning? Right? In person learning, you might need a computer on hand. At distance learning, it might be, hey, I need to know that I have a Zoom meeting available and that all my students have access to Zoom. Things like that. So knowing where your training is going to take place is really going to dictate what types of tools you need and what types of setup you're going to have to do as that trainer. Finally, we have the why. Okay, it's important to understand why your training is necessary. Right? What is the end goal that we want to see come out of this training? A lot of times that's a performance metric. Okay, we're introducing this training program to increase safety scores, to increase productivity. We want to decrease costs or increase sales, right? So knowing what you're building towards will help you cater your training towards that end goal. Right, that performance metric that you're hoping to see our skills transfer towards. Speaking of that idea of skill transfer, we can also look at job performance, right? We can go in and observe the workers and see, are the skills we practiced in the training being transferred to the real world, to the working job? Okay, and we'll talk more about that in evaluation on how to look for that, but that's something to consider. Right? What skills are we trying to transfer into? What are we trying to get better at in the real world, right? From this training. Funding is also another reason that we might have trainings. Okay, it might be necessary to burn up some excess money through a training program. Okay, it happens a lot of the time. So funding might determine our training. And you have to know, are we getting a single allocation? Is this a one-time payment, a one-time training? Is this a limited allocation? Maybe we have a year's worth of funding, so that'll cater into a year's worth of training. Or maybe it's a recurring thing. Okay, but being aware of that funding aspect or dynamic will really help you kind of understand why we're training or why we're training for a certain period of time, that sort of thing. And then finally, why is training necessary? A lot of times it is an industry requirement. Okay. In teaching, you have to have so many continuing ed classes. Okay. A lot of times there's also laws that have to have training on, right? Things like HIPAA in the medical field, FERPA in education. Okay. OSHA if you're working in a factory. Right? A lot of times these laws dictate that we have to have so many trainings so frequently. And that's why we're training. Not necessarily because we're bad at FERPA, but because it's the law that we retrain on FERPA every year. Okay, I think it's important to recognize when your training is a requirement like this because, well, people might see this content pretty frequently. So that might change how you introduce things if you know they've seen a FERPA training 5 years in a row, right? It might adjust how you create that training. Okay, so these are all reasons on why training is important. All right, so that is my take on the types of training I want you guys to be considering in that analysis phase of ADDIE. Okay, as far as from here, there are a couple resources that you guys can check out on some different types of training methods, as well as types of training programs. Okay, I'd like you guys to take a look at both of those because those will come up in our discussion. As far as extending your learning this week, if you want to learn more about blended learning or blended teaching or synchronous versus asynchronous, there's a couple resources there that you can check out. As normal, there is a practice quiz that you can take a look at. Quiz is mostly fill in the blank, just rehashing why is it important to know these different aspects of the training, okay? So this is a little more reflective this week rather than multiple choice, but try that out if you want to do that practice quiz and kind of think through your thoughts. As far as knowledge check number 2, we are going to have another discussion this week. Okay, I did like your guys' discussion posts last week, the ones that I've seen so far. I like that a lot of people found the UNR positions for training. Okay, there's a lot of openings and potential there. If you guys are trying to get your start as an instructional designer or instructional technologist, those jobs seem to come up pretty frequently. As far as this week, okay, I'd like you guys to come up with a hypothetical training scenario. Okay, this can be related to the job search from last week. If you want to kind of role play as that trainer, you can come up with a scenario related to that job posting, or you can come up with something totally different. That's fine, right? But this week, you're going to answer the questions of your scenario. Who is the training for? What group size do you anticipate? What are your learners being trained to do? When will that training take place? Where will it take place? Why is it necessary, right? So these first 6 questions are all related to our PowerPoint in this video. And then questions 7 and 8 refer to those reading resources here. Okay, so check out that top one for question 7 or the bottom one for question 8. And I'm just asking you guys, which training method or training program do you think is appropriate based on your scenario here? Okay, so this is our week 2 knowledge check. This is going to build into our logic model project next week. Okay, so this will build towards that. It is a discussion post, remember, so please try to get your initial post done by Thursday, so that gives others a chance to reply by next Monday. Okay. I think that's it. If you guys don't see this today, enjoy the holiday. Obviously, anything that I write is due on a Thursday or Monday. If it falls on a holiday, that goes to the next day. So if you don't answer that discussion post till tomorrow, that is totally fine for last week, okay? Since today is a holiday. But yeah, that's what I have for you guys. If you have any questions at all, remember we have Zoom office hours on Thursdays from 4 to 5. Feel free to pop in, or you can send me a message on Canvas, send me an email. But that's week 2 on the types of training. So enjoy, and I hope you guys have a great week.